Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Smart Tea podcast, where we talk about the lives of scientists and innovators who shape the world. I'm Aarati.
And I'm her mom, Jyoti.
Today, Mom, I have a kind of different story for you. So
Okay.
normally on this podcast, we talk about, scientists who have made breakthroughs in science. But today, I have a story of a scientist who made a breakthrough in the way we do science. So it's a little
The
bit different.
method rather than the actual result.
Exactly. And so I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on this episode because you are a scientist, you actively do bench science. And so I feel like a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is something that you'll have very firsthand knowledge of and will experience all the time.
This sounds fun. Yes, I would love to listen to this story.
Awesome. So today we are going to be talking about a man named Henry Beecher. He is most known for two things. First is studying the placebo effect.
Yes. Placebo, so you're going to talk about clinical trials because sometimes what happens is just because people are getting drugs, they think, oh, so I should be getting better because the doctor gave me this drug to make me better. And the mental fortitude that they get due to being administered a drug that allows them to self heal. And that's like a placebo effect. Just because
Yeah.
you think you should get better, you actually do get better. There is self healing. We humans are
hmm
remarkable organisms. We
Yeah,
have
mind over
a
matter.
remarkable capacity for self healing.
Yeah, so the placebo effect has always been interesting to me. And so that's kind of how I got into this story. But then the second part of his story, he gets really into bioethics. And so we're going to be talking about how we do science ethically and human research and the regulations around human experimentation.
This is something that I'm conflicted about even right now. I mean,
hmm
all the time in my work, I have this. And if you marry the two concepts together, the placebo effect and the bioethics, that opens up such a big can of worms.
Yes. And we're getting
Um,
into that can of worms today.
okay.
So let's start with Henry Beecher's personal story and his life and how he grew up. So Henry was born on February 4th, 1904 in Wichita, Kansas, to Henry and Mary Unangst. When he was born, he was actually given the name Harry Knowles Unangst. He ended up changing his name to Henry Knowles Beecher later, and we'll get into that, but for now I'm going to call him Harry. For his childhood, he was known as Harry.
Okay.
He was the second of three children, although his older brother Eugene died in infancy. However, his younger sister Ruth survived, and there was about a 10-year age gap between them. The family lived about 20 miles south of Wichita in a small rural town called Peck, and their family did well enough, and Harry had what sounded like a very typical country upbringing for the times. Both sides of his family had settled in the area, so he was surrounded by cousins and grandparents and extended family all the time. The family had a farm that generated some income, but it wasn't anything like extravagant. So,
But it still sounds like a very idyllic childhood. I can imagine him running around the farm. I always imagine growing up on a farm to be fairly idyllic because you're so close to nature. So, yeah, what you can learn by actually getting your hands dirty in the soil and looking at plants, all of that, you cannot get that from any book or any kind of university.
yeah, and he got along with pretty much everyone except for his father. His
Okay.
father, when I was reading about him, kind of seemed like this quote unquote macho guy. He liked to drink and gamble, and he thought that boys should play sports. And
Mm,
Harry, on the other hand, was more quiet and had more of a
mm,
gentle nature. He preferred to
mm,
read rather than go outside and play with all the other
mm,
kids. He liked to play the piano.
mm.
He had a pet parrot for a while, and he liked to garden and bake and make candy. And so I can just see that the father's like, you're not a real boy, you're not a real man. Like, what is this?
Yeah, it's that toxic masculinity. There are people who really have a very toxic idea of what masculine should look like. And that's where these concepts came out. Like oh, boys don't cry or something like that. So then
Yeah.
the only outlet for them then becomes anger. And so
Hmm.
that leads to so much toxicity and violence. So I'm glad people are waking up and understanding that there are definitions of masculinity and what exactly is masculine. So it sounds like the son actually is a real man. The father
Yes.
was just a blustering, chest thumping rooster.
Yes. And so that caused a lot of tension
Yeah,
between the two of them.
I
And
can understand.
yeah. After graduating from Wichita High School, Harry enrolled in the University of Kansas. And by this time, the tension between Harry and his father had gotten worse. His
Hmm.
father refused to help him financially with university expenses, and so Harry had to work and get loans to put himself through school. And we know that on his registration card for school, Harry listed only his mother as his parent.
Okay.
When he entered college, he didn't particularly know what he wanted to do, but by the end of sophomore year, he found himself being drawn to chemistry. He joined the Alpha Chi Sigma fraternity, which is for chemical sciences. He also worked for a summer in a bacteriology lab under Professor Lee E. Treese, and in 4 years, he graduated with his Bachelor's of Arts in chemistry. After he graduated, he stayed at the University of Kansas and he did his master's in physical chemistry. That same year, sadly, in 1927, Harry's mother died of pneumonia.
Oh, no.
Harry was devastated at the news because his mother was his one true parent.
Yeah. So mentally, actually, even though he still has his father, he feels
Hmm.
orphaned.
Yeah. And his little sister Ruth was only 13 at the time, and Harry did not trust his father to look after her properly.
Absolutely.
And so Harry sued to be her guardian.
Good for him.
Yeah. He won the petition along with her inheritance. But, he's this 23-year-old guy still trying to go to school. And now he's got this 13-year-old girl to take care of. And so I'm sure he was very stressed.
But this is a true man, actually.
Yes.
unlike
Yes.
unlike the father, this is so funny, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah.
the father is looking down upon him for being a piano player and a gentle soul. But he is the one who has the guts and determination to make sure that his little sister is done right by.
Yeah. He's shouldering the responsibility of taking care of his
Yeah.
family.
Like a real man.
Yeah. Ruth knew deep down that Harry loved her, but there were times that he could be a bit harsh. For example, he sold off a little desk that she loved and kind of just told her
Hmm.
get over it because they needed the
Ah,
money.
very sad. Hmm.
But in reading about it, I was reminded of the saying I've seen on social media. A lot of times people will say this, especially about New Yorkers, that New Yorkers are not nice, but they are kind. And I
Uh-huh.
think that really is a very apt description for him that he was
Hmm.
rough
Hmm.
around the edges, a bit harsh, but he's doing what's best for you?
It's also, I think that he was absolutely trying to survive at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And every decision like this is made through the lens of what's for the greater good. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, right now she loves the desk, but there will be no food on the table if we
Yeah.
don't sell the desk. And later we can buy her another desk that she likes. But right now we need food. That
Yes.
kind of practicality forces you to make extremely harsh and practical decisions. And yes, the
Yeah.
other person does feel bad, but
Yeah.
what can you do?
What can you do? Yeah.
What can you do?
But it's just he didn't have that kind of soothing nature
Yes,
and he wasn't very kind about it. He was just like, you need to get over this because we need to do this. And so
that's
his
exactly how my
bedside
dad
manner
was.
wasn't great.
This
Yeah.
That's exactly how my dad was actually. He would just lay
Hmm.
down the law and just say,
Hmm.
this is what we need to do. Because he had so much responsibility on his
Hmm.
shoulders at such a young age. And he brought us up in basically we were clawing at the edges of poverty. And
Hmm.
we somehow made our way up. And he would just lay down the law and say, this is what needs to be done.
Yeah.
Sorry, can't afford singing lessons even though you like them. No,
Hmm.
this is what we're going to do. You're going to do this. That kind of
Yes.
thing. So, very, very practical things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I got that same impression from him that we don't have time for emotions right now. We're just trying to survive. We're just trying to get through this. So he's just graduated with his BA in chemistry, and a friend from his university helped him get a position as a chemistry teacher at Highland College. In the 1928 yearbook for Highland College, his picture is in there, and it has the caption that says, quote, "Perhaps he'll get to lunch on time, and perhaps he won't, but he's at chemistry at 8 o'clock sharp every morning. He is certainly right there with the scientific facts and his grade book. The boarding club is deeply indebted to Mr. Unangst for keeping the mice from the piano and for the musical entertainment he has furnished them," end quote.
Known for having his priorities smack on. Like I am a chemistry teacher and that's what I'm going to be focusing on. And
Yes.
if I miss lunch, well, too bad, isn't it?
So I thought that was a nice little snapshot of him.
Absolutely.
Meanwhile, though, Harry was still hoping to continue his education. He wanted to do his PhD in chemistry, but for some reason, his friends and professors back at the University of Kansas were strongly pushing him to go to medical school. They finally persuaded him that for whatever reason, it was a better course for his life.
Okay.
So while he's teaching at Highland, he's also making sure he has all the prerequisites he needs to apply for Harvard Medical School.
Wow.
I'm not sure why he wanted to go to Harvard specifically, but it could just be, it's Harvard. So
yeah, of course. And also, it seems to be that people around him really saw him as a shining star with very high potential. And
yes.
it is likely that it is not just that they said, you not only do you need to be in medical school, you need to be at the best medical school because that's your caliber.
But I think it was surprising to me that he did end up applying to medical school because even in his application to Harvard in 1928, he doesn't actually show any interest in medicine or treating patients. Instead, he writes about his research at the University of Kansas and said, quote, "Out of this research experience and past courses has grown the desire to do work in biology, especially bacteriology. In order to fit myself for such research, I hope to get the degree of Doctor of Medicine," end quote.
So he's indicating even then that he really wants to pursue a research path.
Yes. And so I think today, if you were saying things like that, people would say, why don't you get your PhD then? Because, that's what the PhD is for.
Or MD, PhD maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, you could do both, but,
Yeah.
But anyway, Harvard was apparently like, good enough for us, you're in. In the summer of 1928, kind of in a final screw you to his father, he officially changed his name from Harry Knowles Unangst to Harry Knowles Beecher.
And was Beecher his mother's name or something?
No, so that's interesting. The Beecher name apparently was somewhere in his family lineage, like his mother's great-grandmother's maiden name or something like that.
Okay.
But also, now that he's going to Harvard and he's going to Boston, he's going to be surrounded by all these high society, like city people.
Yeah.
And so the name Beecher, especially in Boston, was associated with a prominent clergyman and abolitionist, Henry Ward Beecher, and his sister, the author Harriet Beecher Stowe.
Yes, famous.
Yes. And so, although he was in no way related, he might have wanted that kind of association.
Yes. He's a small town boy going into big city leagues. He's at least trying to help himself a little bit by having his name not stand out so much. Or if it stands out for a good reason. People say, are you related to that good Beecher there? And then, no, but I like him or something. Yeah.
I thought it was kind of like changing your last name to Kennedy because, there's so many people with the last name Kennedy, but does that mean you're related to the Kennedys?
To the Kennedy family, correct.
Maybe that's not, right. But, it's hard to prove that you're not. So it just sounds better in social circles that,
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
For the same reason, over time, he adopted the first name Henry as well, which was a little bit surprising to me given that that's his father's name and how much he disliked his father. But to him, Harry just sounded more casual and endearing, whereas Henry was someone that you took seriously as a
some
professional.
Weight. Yeah. And especially for a medical profession, you want to be like that. Yes.
Yeah. So It was all in his own head. I mean, we would have been talking about him regardless of his name because he's went
Yes.
on to do great things.
It,
But, you know,
but this kind of small changes that you make, they help
hmm
with self-confidence, which
yes,
allows you
exactly.
to approach life with a different attitude. You're
hmm
going out there and asserting and taking up the space that you need to take up.
Yeah. So he did it to make himself feel better. And I love that for him. So off to Harvard Medical School he goes. His little sister Ruth, by the way, stayed home in Wichita. Although she was still technically a minor, she became extremely independent. And pretty much as soon as she turned 18, she went off to Alaska and got married to an army chaplain there. So she just made her own way in life.
Good for her. The kids had to really grow up fast. After
Yeah,
their mom died, they just had to be like practically functioning like adults.
she did it for herself.
Good for her.
At Harvard Medical School, Henry started to become interested in respiratory physiology and anesthesiology. So, if you remember from our episode on Virginia Apgar, anesthesiology at this time is just starting to come into its own as a medical field.
I remember it used to be a domain predominantly run by nurses,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't considered to be a very high level skill, which is the exact opposite of what it is today. Being an anesthesiologist is actually the biggest challenge in medical medicine today, and getting into that field is very hard. But
Mm-hmm.
this is right at the cusp where they are recognizing, wait a second, we can't just put a person out and expect them to wake back up after surgery
Mm-hmm.
without thinking things through and seeing how the body metabolizes the drug and all of that.
Yes, exactly. And so Henry joins this wave of young doctors who are going into anesthesiology.
Awesome.
He won 3 research fellowships during this time, and he did research and published papers on how some people developed breathing problems after abdominal surgery that could lead to other complications like pneumonia or lung collapse, which is why apparently it's important to do deep breathing exercises after getting surgery to reduce the risk. He also studied the causes of pneumonia and how lung infections set in,
Mhm.
and his work caught the attention of Dr. Edward Churchill, who was a professor of surgery at Harvard, and
Okay.
he ended up taking Henry under his wing. After graduating from Harvard, Henry went to do 2 years of surgical training under Dr. Churchill at Massachusetts General Hospital.
Okay.
He also got married to a woman called Margaret Swain in 1934, who was the daughter of an obstetrician. So
Okay.
I'm assuming they met through his work at the hospital.
Through work and
Yeah.
some work party or something. Uh-huh.
Yes. He then traveled to Copenhagen for a year in 1935 to work with Dr. August Crow, who won the Nobel Prize for his work in understanding how capillaries are regulated and control the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide in our blood.
Nice. He's moving
hmm
in very high circles in terms of the scientific findings that's going on.
Yes. And fun fact, August Crow is one of the founders of Novo Nordisk, the pharmaceutical company. Novo Nordisk right now is popular because they produce Ozempic and Wegovy, those GLP-1 drugs. Yeah.
Got it. All right. Makes sense.
But obviously they do a lot of other a lot
Of
of other
course.
things, of course. They're a
Of course.
big pharmaceutical company.
Yeah.
After his year in Copenhagen, Henry came back to the US and was hired by Dr. Churchill as an anesthetist in chief at
Okay.
Massachusetts General Hospital and an instructor of anesthesiology at Harvard.
Nice.
At the General Hospital, he founded America's first anesthesiology research lab, and over the next several years, he worked to grow it. By 1941, he became a professor of anesthesiology at Harvard, which
Nice.
one source pointed out was a bit ironic because he had never actually trained under an anesthesiologist.
Yeah, but he's able to just pick up the skills enough to
hmm
actually be a full-time professor of the subject.
And I mean,
Amazing.
also, well, it also goes to show you the times because there probably weren't that many anesthesiologists that he could even study under because it
That's
was
true.
such a
It
new
is an
field.
emerging field. It is a very, very new field. So you kind of pick it up just on the go.
Hmm.
And then they figure out who is skilled enough to become the teacher for the next generation. That's right.
This carries us right into World War II,
Yeah.
the thing that comes in and affects everybody in our stories.
Everybody. Yes.
As an anesthesiologist and a researcher, Henry joins the effort as an Army Medical Corps major to study anesthesia in wounded soldiers on the battlefield. He was briefly sent to North Africa and then to Italy, and
Hmm.
he's treating wounded soldiers with morphine to relieve their pain.
Yes.
And here's where he makes the first very important observation of his career. So, exactly how he makes his observation is up to some debate. Some people say that one day he ran out of morphine, and so
Uh-huh.
instead he starts giving the wounded soldiers injections of saline just to appease them.
Yes. This is what I was
Yeah.
talking. This is where the placebo effect comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
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 So there's no formal mention of this story anywhere. It's kind of a tall tale. But what
Yeah.
we do have is a paper that Henry published in 1946, just after the war, called Pain in Men Wounded in Battle. In this paper, he writes about 215 severely wounded soldiers. For each of these soldiers, he asked them, "Are you in pain?" And if they said yes, he asked them to rate it as slight, moderate, or bad. He then asked if they wanted pain relief medication.
Okay.
Surprisingly, about 75% of the soldiers said that they had either no pain, slight pain, or moderate pain and declined pain medication even when it was offered to them.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
And remember, these are soldiers who are severely wounded. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
And then even the soldiers who accepted pain medication often reported that they were still pain free several hours after he gave them just a small dose of morphine. On the other hand, he's comparing this to cases that he had seen before the war, where people were similarly severely injured in accidents. And he was like, most of those people would rate their pain as really bad and want pain medication.
Hmm.
So, why is there this difference between
Correct.
soldiers and normal civilians?
Is it the mental fortitude that a soldier has
Not
for his profession?
fortitude, but in his paper, he wrote, quote, "It is important to consider the position of the soldier.
Ah.
His wound suddenly releases him from an exceedingly dangerous environment, one filled with
Ah.
fatigue, discomfort, anxiety, fear, and the real danger of death, and gives him a ticket of safety of the hospital. His troubles are about over, or he thinks they are," end quote.
That's a very good point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it hurts, but it's better than the danger of suddenly being shot on the battlefield. That
Yes,
makes a lot of sense.
they're actually relieved to be wounded badly because they're like, this gets me out of the battlefield. Whereas if you're
Yes,
a regular civilian going about your day and you get into some horrible accident, now your life is in disaster mode.
absolutely. Yeah.
And so this gets Henry thinking about the placebo effect, the fact that these soldiers have this intense relief that's somehow able to override their pain.
Yes.
And so we knew about the placebo effect at this time. It's an ancient observation. Healers and doctors have recognized for centuries that sometimes convincing a patient that they were helping them just by giving them a sugar pill or even
Yes.
just offering words of comfort could go a really long way towards helping the patient.
Absolutely. This is actually very true. In India, I have seen this all the time. I was a young girl in India during a time when the GP would actually visit the house. So the doctor actually came with his little black bag
Mm-hmm.
to the house of the patient. There would be somebody who would be moaning and groaning, and the doctor would just offer sugar pills. And that itself would make the person feel so much better. And
Yes.
sometimes it's almost feels like the person just wanted some social interaction and put
Yeah.
up a fuss until somebody came to visit them.
And now it's like, okay, I saw the
Yes,
doctor. Everything's good now.
everything is
The
good. The
doctor
doctor
said I'll
knows.
be okay.
The
Yeah.
doctor looked at me and has offered me these pills, which are
Hmm.
actually just sugar, but I don't know that, and
Yeah.
I'll be better.
The word placebo comes from the Latin phrase meaning "I shall please." And the term placebo was formally introduced to medicine in the 1700s by an English physician, Alexander Sutherland, and a Scottish physician, William Cullen. In 1799, a British doctor, John Haygarth, conducted the first real placebo trial. At the time, apparently there were these long metal needle type things called Perkins tractors that were being sold to patients with the claim that they could be used to draw out diseases.
I'm glad I don't live in those times.
I know, right? Here's a big needle you can stick yourself with. It'll pull out
And
your.
you can just pull it
Yeah.
out and the
Yes.
disease comes right out.
Yep.
Wow.
They were extremely expensive. And
Mm,
John Haygarth was like, I think you're extorting sick people by calling this needle special somehow, when I bet
okay.
a wooden needle would work just as well. And it did. If he took a wooden needle, a wooden Perkins tractor, and convinced the patient that he was going to be able to draw out their disease with this cheap wooden stick,
Yes.
essentially, the efficacy rate was just as good as using a metal needle.
Because really, both of them are just placebo effects.
Exactly.
Actually, I know he's trying to prove the wooden needle to be the placebo, but
Hmm.
in reality, now we know you cannot take a needle, stick it in, and pull it out. It's all happening mentally. So
Yes.
this is the placebo effect all the way, in fact.
Hmm. Yeah. And so the placebo effect is a known thing. But when Henry makes this observation in soldiers, he takes it a step further. He suggests that maybe doctors should be aware of the placebo effect when it came to treating pain, and therefore use a bit more discretion when handing out drugs like morphine,
Yeah.
because morphine can be dangerous. You can overdose on
Yes.
morphine.
And it can be highly addictive also.
Yeah. And doctors at the time are just giving morphine to people who were in accidents and were maybe just shaken up or confused or in shock, and
Yes.
they weren't clearly articulating that they were in pain.
Correct. You need to dose those with a little bit of a light hand.
Yes, exactly. So Henry's like, even if the patient is injured, they may not actually be in pain because they're in shock, in which
Yes.
case, maybe hold off on giving them morphine,
Yes.
or at least start them with a lower dose, because they're not actually in pain. Even if they have this like huge thing, this huge wound, and you're like, you must be in pain, they might be in
Yes.
shock and not be feeling pain.
That's
So you
right.
don't need to treat them for pain. So don't
Makes
give them
very good
something.
sense. Absolutely.
Hi everyone, Aarati here. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. If so, and you wish someone would tell your science story, I founded a science communications company called SciComm, that's SYKOM, that can help. SciComm blends creativity with scientific accuracy to create all types of science communications content, including explainer videos, slide presentations, science writing, and more. We work with academic researchers, tech companies, nonprofits, or really any scientist to help simplify your science. Check us out at scicommer.com. That's SYKOMMER.com. Okay, back to the story. So after the war, Henry returned to his anesthesiology lab at Massachusetts General Hospital, and he began to study the placebo effect more carefully. I want to preface this by saying that these studies that he was doing were extremely flawed by today's standards, but the
Okay.
main point still remains. He conducted his own small-scale experiments, but he also reviewed 15 clinical trials that had been published where patients were given medications for different illnesses, like coughs or anxiety. A lot of them were for pain.
Okay.
And in each of these trials, the patients had been split into two groups. One was given the real medication, and the other was given a placebo. And Henry noted that across these 15 trials, about 35% of the patients who were given a placebo improved. In 1955, he published this in a paper called The Powerful Placebo. And he
Hmm.
argued that doctors had to be more careful when saying how effective a new medicine was, because many
Yes.
patients in the placebo group had also gotten better.
Yes.
Mhm.
In today's world, the efficacy of the drug has to be a percentage above the placebo in order to actually make the cut.
Yes. And so that tells you the state of statistics in research at the time also.
Absolutely. The fact that they were actually dividing the patient population into two groups
Mm-hmm.
and having a placebo group and a drug group.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they are not fully analyzing what's happening to the placebos and just saying, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, the drug works. That itself says that they haven't completely understood what they are doing. The whole
Yes.
point of the placebo is to see how much better is the drug compared to the placebo group. So, yeah, placebo, there was like 1/3 of the people got better on their own.
Mm-hmm.
However, in with the drug, 60% of the people got better.
Mm.
And
Yes.
that means there was a drug effect.
Yes.
You
Yes.
have to say, you have to do that. You have to
Yeah.
do that
You have to
whole
do the
statistical
statistics between the
comparison.
two. Yeah.
Correct. There has to be a distinct difference between the two groups. And if there is, then you don't need to have a third group who is not treated at all,
Mm-hmm.
because you are subtracting out self-healing from both groups by doing that.
Gotcha. Makes sense. The other important thing that we have to note about his studies at this time was that most of the data and the trials that Henry reviewed were very subjective. They were treating patients for anxiety or pain, where you ask the patient how they're feeling before and after
Yes.
giving them the medication.
Yeah. There is no scale to measure all that. So
Yeah.
whatever the patient says, and like you pointed out, a civilian could be saying, "I'm in severe pain with just
Mm-hmm.
a stubbed toe," whereas the soldier is gritting through a major injury and saying, "Not really. I'm good. Don't worry about me."
Yeah. So there's nothing like quantitative that they're
Exactly.
measuring.
How are you
Yeah.
going to measure that? How are you going to compare the two?
Yes. But still, a very important paper, and the impact of this paper on the medical community was interesting. Overall, Henry's paper was the first real push for scientists to start including randomized control groups into
Okay.
clinical trials and
Hmm.
to be more rigorous about proving that a new medication actually worked. But in some people's view, it legitimized giving patients placebos instead of medication in certain cases.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's where we start to veer into the field of ethics.
I
So
see.
doctors started to question whether it was ever okay for a doctor to try and fool a patient into thinking that they were getting real medication in hopes of triggering the placebo effect. Or was it always the doctor's job to be honest, even if it meant the patient would not feel confident in their outcome and therefore have a worse outcome because they were feeling bad?
That question is addressed in today's clinical trial, where you
Mm-hmm.
are evaluating a drug against a placebo. When people sign on to a new clinical trial for a new drug,
Mm-hmm.
they are told right off the bat that it's a randomized trial,
Yes.
and the person administering it does not have a clue whether
Mm-hmm.
it's drug or placebo. So not only does the person receiving the drug versus placebo have no clue, but the person administering it, the doctor, also does not know.
That's what they mean by double blind, right?
Double blind, yeah,
Both are blind.
correct. Some other person, a clinician,
Mm-hmm.
will prepare the vials to be that need to be administered and just
Yes.
label them something random like A, B, C, D, E, F, G or something. And there will be other people who never come in touch with the doctor, who never come in
Yes.
touch with the subject.
Mm-hmm.
And they know what is A and what is B and what is C and what is D. So the person who is preparing those vials doesn't know who is going to get it. And the person who receives the vial doesn't know what's in it.
Yes.
And then finally, after you see the results, then you go back and say, so what was this?
Yes. What did A correspond to? Was A medication or was A placebo? Was
Correct.
B medication or was B placebo? Yeah.
Correct. And that is how you then determine whether there was a drug effect versus the placebo.
Yes. So we're starting to think about these questions because back then they weren't doing that at all, you know?
Yes.
And these questions just added to other ethical questions that had arisen from Henry's work. For example, if a patient couldn't articulate fully what they were feeling, maybe because the situation they were in was so traumatic, was it more ethical to withhold pain treatment because the patient couldn't consent, or was it more ethical to give it to them? And more recently, it came out in July 2007, so many years after Henry's death,
Mhm.
that after World War II, Henry had actually continued to consult with the US government on anesthesia and its potential use as a mind-altering drug.
Oh, I see.
So in the 1950s, the CIA was conducting a series of highly classified projects under the code name MK Ultra, which maybe you remember Arpita talked about this a little bit in her episode on Albert Hoffman and LSD.
Ah,
This was a
yes.
couple years ago that
Yes.
we did that episode.
Yes.
But basically, MK Ultra were highly unethical experiments on people that used a combination of mind-altering drugs like LSD and anesthesia. Apparently, that's why they brought Henry in. And they combined that with torturous interrogation techniques to see if they could develop a kind of truth serum for identifying spies and double agents.
Hard. That is rough to listen to. Okay.
Yes. And we think that Henry saw many of the atrocious violations of human rights during his involvement in this project. And this
Yes.
is what prompted him to become an advocate for ethical medical research.
Ah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yes. It's also important to note that there were rules to protect human rights in scientific experimentation that had been established by the Nuremberg Codes in 1947, following World War II. And then in
Yes.
1953, the NIH created a policy that required informed consent from volunteers. But oftentimes, American researchers would ignore these rules and even outright argue against them.
Ah,
So Henry was not outright accusing American researchers of this, but he was strongly drawing the comparison, saying that if
yes.
Americans were breaking the Nuremberg codes, we're no better than the Nazis.
Absolutely. Yes. We saw the
Yes.
horrors inflicted upon ordinary people by that regime.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So we do
Yes.
need to have those kind of ethics in place. Correct.
Yes. And you need to
And they
follow
need to
them
be
because
followed.
otherwise, yeah, what's the point? You can't say these rules are for the
Yeah.
Nazis and not for us, you
Correct.
know?
Correct. Because then you're no better. Yeah.
In 1965, the Upjohn Pharmaceutical Company held a conference in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and they asked
Mhm.
Henry to come talk about medical ethics. Henry prepared a 40-minute speech in which he basically dropped this massive bombshell, citing at least 18 published studies, which he said violated basic human rights.
No way.
Yes. His speech was not well received.
Of
Medical
course.
investigators criticized him, saying he was exaggerating and making irresponsible allegations.
Mm.
But this only encouraged Henry to go one step further. The following year, in 1966, he basically took his speech and turned it into a paper called Ethics and Clinical Research. In it, he described 22 clinical trials where patients had been exposed to something risky or harmful without their consent, and sometimes
Mm.
without even knowing that they were part of an experiment.
No way.
Yeah,
Oh, wow. Wow, that is so scary.
I know, right? Can you
You go to
imagine?
the doctor for something, and all of a sudden you are inadvertently made into a guinea pig for something that some other agenda that's going on in the background that you have no awareness of.
Yeah. He didn't name
Scary.
any names of researchers or universities, but the paper was still rejected by the Journal of the American Medical Association for being too controversial.
Yeah, they didn't want the inflammatory information to be out there because people basically will completely lose trust in doctors then.
Yes. And also, I think it was like, even though he didn't name any names, in many cases, it was pretty
You
obvious.
You
Yeah.
know, when you
Like,
know, that kind of thing. So
yeah.
when you're in the inner circle, you know exactly what, because if he's citing 22 clinical trials,
Yes.
people who are in the business know who ran them.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, the ordinary man on the street may not know that, but
Yeah.
the people who are in the know, they know who is doing this. And they're
Yes.
probably people with big names and big money as well. And so they have, again, they have the, money talks, and they have the ability to suppress this kind of information.
Yeah. But it was published by the New England Journal of Medicine after the editor-in-chief overruled 6 out of 7 peer reviewers who had also wanted to reject it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. He found an ally.
Yes.
You know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of 12 Angry Men, the
Oh,
movie.
yeah.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
that there is one guy who is like, let's at least give this a fair trial. And if
Mm-hmm.
all 11 of you reject it, then I'll wind up. But then he finds one ally. And then
Yes.
finally, at the end of the movie, he is able to completely exonerate the young boy on trial. This is what it reminds me of. You need one ally when you fight these kind of lonely battles for justice.
Yes. So this paper gets published and people are reading it. And in some of the trials that he describes, scientists are doing truly unethical things. In one trial, scientists had given patients an injection that they said contained, quote, some cells. And they conveniently left out the fact that they were live cancer cells.
No,
Yeah.
you go to a doctor and you get injected with live cancer cells.
Without your knowledge or consent or
That
knowing
is
anything about it.
shocking. That is absolutely shocking. And that should be classified as murder.
Or attempted murder. Yeah.
Yeah, that's attempted murder. And if the person dies, it is murder.
Yeah. Just crazy. In another case, patients with a bacterial infection were not given antibiotics because researchers wanted to see how the disease progressed naturally and compare it to their drug, even though there was an effective antibiotic that existed.
This is so difficult to listen to.
Yeah. Well, I was wondering, like, today, if you were, testing a new drug and there was already a drug that existed, but you wanted to know if your drug was better, wouldn't your control group get the existing drug and you would compare your drug to it?
They do, so yeah, they do things like that where they'll have 6 or 7 randomized arms. Like multiple companies are targeting the same indication with
Mm-hmm.
similar drugs. Then you have a big platform, and each arm in the trial is given one of the drugs. And then
Mm-hmm.
there is a placebo also, and everything is double blinded. And then you open it all and say who did best.
And I
Yes.
wonder also if, like, in this particular case, they could have done it better in terms of, like, we'll only take this experiment for 2 weeks, after which time you will get whatever antibiotic
Yes,
it is. Like, not put
you're
your
right.
life in danger, basically.
That is
Like,
absolutely right. That's exactly what they do today, actually. Open label. That's what they call it. Where if you already know that there is efficacy with the drug,
mhm,
then you wait for a month or so or whatever the stipulated time. But
mhm,
then when you start to see that the people who are getting the drug are seeing the response,
mhm.
at that time, everybody realizes, oh, the drug is effective. Point number one.
Yes.
The second point is, even though it is supposed to be double blinded, it's no longer blinded because the doctors who are administering it, the nurses who are administering it, the patients, if they are talking to each other, everybody
Yeah.
sees that fellow is getting better and
Yeah.
I'm not, or vice versa. The
Mhm.
doctor is seeing multiple patients and knows exactly who is getting better and who is not. At which point, then again, the ethical question comes up. And then they say, I cannot, in good conscience, continue to give the placebo to these people.
Mhm.
Give me the drug for everybody.
Gotcha.
So they keep it randomized and closed and double blinded for a certain amount of time and then they open it.
Yes. So I think in this case,
They should have opened it up after a certain amount of time.
yeah. And I think what made it even worse is that a lot of these patients were not able to consent properly, either because they were handicapped in some way, or they were minors, or they were coerced by the researchers into believing that they couldn't say no to taking part in the experiment.
Terrible, terrible.
Of course, this paper sparked immediate public outcry.
Of
People
course.
were shocked and outraged that medical professionals would ignore such basic human rights. There was a lot of back and forthing, with some clinicians trying to undermine Henry's paper or say that the claims were exaggerated, and many claimed that he was just trying to get his 15 minutes of fame by pointing fingers. But eventually, the government was forced to act. It took a while, though. So it wasn't until 1972, which is like 7 or 8 years later, that a lawyer named Peter Buxton blew the whistle on an unethical study that involved 400 African American people in Tuskegee, Alabama, who
Uh-huh.
had syphilis and went into a study thinking that they would be getting free health care, when in fact researchers withheld giving them penicillin, which was a well-established treatment for syphilis.
Wow, that's so wrong.
When the news broke, a group called the National Commission for the Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical and Behavioral Research was
Hmm.
formed, and they established guides for human research. And finally, in 1981, the government passed a law requiring that experiments involving human subjects needed to have informed consent and that trials needed to be approved by institutional review boards, or
Ah,
IRBs.
the IRB. That's when the
Hmm.
IRB came into play. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, we have to write long, long, long pieces to the IRB when something needs to get through there. Yes.
Just for people who don't know, an IRB is a panel of researchers that is in a similar field, but not directly involved in the experiment.
So they have the scientific understanding, but
Hmm.
they don't have a stake in the game. So they are
Correct.
able to make a unbiased decision.
Hmm. Exactly.
Yes. And now the IRBs are in place even for animal studies.
Oh, yeah. Arpita was actually telling me about that. I never had to do that because I was working on little tiny worms that proliferate like crazy.
Yes.
They're invertebrates and.
Yeah. But if you are working with any of the vertebrate models like mice or rats or any other higher
Hmm.
species, you have to have an IRB review to ensure that you're not causing unnecessary pain. You're keeping them healthy and as comfortable as you possibly can. So, for example, if a drug starts causing a loss of body weight,
Hmm.
that's one of the side effects of the drug, then there will be a cutoff that you can't watch this animal starve itself to death. There are
Yes,
cutoffs like,
yes.
okay, 10% body weight loss, 20% body weight loss, and then you go to procedure A, procedure B, whatever it is. It's already laid out beforehand.
Yeah. So this is where that kind of thing finally came into effect. Henry stayed at Massachusetts General Hospital as chief of anesthesia until 1969. During that time, he established Harvard's first IRB.
So even though the entire world was in uproar due to his publication, his position at Harvard was still strong, and the institution didn't turn against him.
Yes, I think that there were like individual clinicians or researchers who were like, oh my God, he's creating such a pain in the butt for us. Now we have all this paperwork we have to do, and all because he's raising this big stink about ethics or whatever. And so there were people that were upset with him, even at Harvard or Massachusetts General Hospital, but the world at large, or the government and the public were basically like, no, but he's right though. Like you can't just do whatever the heck you want and
Yeah.
at the expense of human lives and human well-being. Yeah, and so yes, maybe it's a bit of a pain to have to go through an IRB now when you didn't have to before, but if it means safeguarding people's health and people's well-being, then yeah, it's necessary. And as if studying the placebo effect and overhauling ethical research wasn't good enough, Henry is also known for one more thing, which
Ah,
is in 1968, he wrote a paper called A Definition of Irreversible Coma, in which he established criteria for when a person was considered brain dead and could therefore ethically be taken off of life support.
oh, that's a big contribution.
Whereas prior to this, death was largely based on whether the heart was still beating or not.
Yeah, and that it's highly subjective. So if the heart continues to beat for 30 years when the person is actually, not present at all, you're just racking up medical bills and burdening the family.
Yeah, there's no life there. And so he's the one who laid out these criteria that brain death also equals death.
Yes, brilliant contribution. That's a big one.
Henry died on July 25th, 1976, of pancreatic cancer at his home in
Hmm.
Boston at the age of 72. Like I said, it only came out after his death that Henry was involved in MK Ultra, And people were initially shocked to learn this because he had been living his life as this paragon of human ethics.
Yes.
And for him to have been involved in any way in unethical studies was
Yes.
really surprising to a lot of people. But then people afterwards went back and looked at the timing of everything, and they were like, no, this actually makes sense, that his involvement is what actually led him to care so much
Yes.
about ethics.
Because he saw how bad it can be firsthand. And then
Mm-hmm.
he realized, no, there needs to be guardrails around this.
Yes,
That
exactly.
there is just too much power in the hands of these clinicians that they just willy-nilly conduct their own little side experiments without the person even knowing. It literally, you're treating human beings like guinea pigs who have
Yeah.
no will, no consent, no information. You're just sitting in a cage built by the clinician around your mind.
Mm-hmm. And so now, thanks to him, we conduct clinical studies much more ethically. Even in my PhD, I had to take an entire course on ethics in biomedical research, even though I was working on worms and, I wasn't working with any vertebrate animals. I wasn't working with any human subjects. I wasn't even getting like blood from patients or anything,
Yeah.
like, I wasn't even working with human samples, but I
Yes,
still had to go through this course. And,
yes,
it's a required course for anyone now doing a PhD or an MD. You have to go through an ethics course.
makes very good sense. We have a lot to be grateful for
Yes.
because if he did not put those guardrails in place, then once people realize that clinicians are just doing whatever they want, then clinical trials themselves will lose their credibility and their legitimacy.
Mm-hmm.
And then making new drugs becomes harder. This whole thing has a boomerang effect. You think you're
Yeah.
getting away with a lot of little nonsense here and there. That person never knew, this person never knew, kind of thing. But
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, truth comes out, and then
Yeah.
people just say, no, we don't believe any of these clinical trials. Nobody's going to enroll in that. Much rather die at peace at home. But now
Mm-hmm.
people still feel, yes, I can help the next person who gets this disease. I may get the placebo, I may get the drug, I don't know, I may live, I may die, but I'll be treated like a human being with dignity. I can go in, enroll, and give these researchers some information, and
Mm-hmm.
the next generation of people. If my grandkid gets the same disease due to heredity or whatever, there will be a drug by that time for him, and I'll go in and do the clinical trial. So that
Yeah.
kind of confidence is there walking into a clinical trial.
Yeah. It's also nice every once in a while to just kind of peek behind the curtain and see how much actually goes into creating a drug like Ozempic or Wegovy before it hits the
Yes,
market. There's so much involved, and it can take years, it can take decades even
yes,
for a
and
drug to
so much
get.
structure around it.
So many people are
Yeah,
involved.
and this is actually a point that I have brought up again because I'm on the drug development side of things. That
Hmm.
people do say, why the heck does an aspirin, a simple aspirin, cost so much? But
Hmm.
this is the reason, because everything that finally reaches the patient has been put through a lot of paces,
Yes.
and all of that costs money. And for the next drug to be made, that money has to be somehow recovered so that then
Hmm.
it can be put towards the next drug on the market.
Yeah. I was really excited to share this one with you, especially because of your expertise and knowledge in this area. So I'm really glad
I
you
would
enjoyed
not
it.
overstate it to that level, expertise. I would say some familiarity with the terms is what I
Yeah.
am at. The real experts would laugh at me
Well,
if
you're
I
more of
call
an
my.
expert than me. So,
I have a little more information. I'm more familiar with the terms. Let us just put
yes.
it that way.
Thanks for listening. If you have a suggestion for a story we should cover or thoughts you want to share about an episode, reach out to us at smartteapodcast.com. You can follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky at Smart Tea Podcast, and listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And leave us a rating or comment. It helps us grow. New episodes are released every other Wednesday. See you next time.